You know what? Let's just have a little casual chat today. Today I want to talk about the American Song Contest because I haven't touched it on this channel yet. I haven't had the time. I was gonna do a video after the first show to talk about how like my initial thoughts were. Then I thought, okay, let's try to do one after maybe the second or the third of the qualifying rounds. Didn't get around to it. But now we are here and we have the semifinal, the first semifinal coming up. So I thought, what better way than now to actually start talking about this contest, because I have been following the American Song Contest ever since day one. And I just want to start off by saying that I think it's so amazing and so interesting to see that this has actually happened. We are actually in the middle of season 1 of the American Song Contest, because I think a lot of people, myself included, wanted this to be a thing, but wasn't sure if it was ever really going to be a thing. Because I mean, we've seen various kinds of shows try to mimic Eurovision over the years to varying degrees of success, right? And we've also seen the EBU try to push for more of these like Eurovision-like shows. And I mean, for people like me who's been around in the fandom and who's been very active in the fandom, around the time where everyone was hyped up about Eurovision Asia, right? That was going to be the big thing. And it seemed like that was a very natural market to progress Eurovision, but it never happened, and it was officially cancelled, I believe, 1 or 2 years ago, right? So I think a lot of people were a little bit pessimistic and was like, yeah, right, American Song Contest, it's never going to happen. But it's here now, and unlike some of the things like Turkvision and others that we've seen in the past couple years, this is actually not only backed by the EBU, officially licensed by the EBU, but it's also produced by people who has worked with Eurovision before, who knows this contest in and out, and actually want to create something that isn't just a Eurovision copy necessarily, but has that like essence of what Eurovision is, and want to bring that in an Americanized way to America. And you know what? I think for a first season, I think they're getting away with it. I've made a list of some pros and some cons that I think that we've seen so far in the past like 4 qualifying heats here, and let's just have a little chat about them. I'm interested to know if any of you guys who are watching this video are following the contest as well, and if you are, let me know what you think down in the comments. But let me just start off with the positive, right? Let me start by actually presenting to you what do I think is actually working really great with the American Song Contest. You know, first of all, I just want to start off by congratulating the broadcast and the producers that they've really managed to get a lot of different kind of music in here. Yes, we've definitely had a lot of country, and we've definitely had a lot of very typical American radio pop, but I think we've also had some different kind of genres in there, and I think it's so interesting that countries just kind of like come out with some different sounds. So some of them comes out with a sound that you wouldn't necessarily think, oh, that's very typical for that state, right? I think one of the ones that people bring up when they talk about this is definitely Alexa from Oklahoma, representing a very country state with a K-pop big production act. It's very interesting to see, and I love that they aren't just playing into these stereotypes 100%. Texas is another great example with Mr. Independent. That's a very non-Texan song, right? But I think it is the same as Eurovision, right? Sometimes you have very Eastern European sounding songs from Eastern Europe, but sometimes they come out with something completely different. And I love that this contest it's very much the artist that's in focus, and I love that it's their style, and they aren't just being forced into singing in a different style than they usually do, because that's what comes from their state. But I'll also just say that I think it is nice that we have all this country that we have, because American music culture, country music is such a big thing there, right? And it would just feel unnatural if it didn't play a huge part on the show. And I really feel like it does, but I think it's cool because it's more, I don't know how to say it, but like authentic country, because we've had country in Eurovision, right? But it always just feels a little bit off because it's from countries that doesn't usually do it, and it's like, I don't know, it just doesn't always feel genuine, but it does here because it's a big part of American culture, and we've definitely seen the juries loving it, and it'll be interesting to see once we get to the semifinal rounds and we actually get to see the jury qualifiers going up against the television voting qualifiers and see how many of these country acts that the jury have picked will actually go through. I think that'll be very interesting to see if the public is voting for these kind of country sounds. But that was, of course, a lot about the music, but the music is only half of it. The other part is the staging, how this looks on television. And I think considering what we have here, like we aren't in a big arena as Eurovision is, we are in a smaller studio. I think even with that, they're actually pulling it off quite well. I think we've had some really fun and unique stagings, and they really went all out there. I've seen a lot of people complain about the fact that you're allowed to have more than 6 people on stage, which is the Eurovision rule. But I don't get why people are complaining about that, because I think it's awesome. And I get why it cannot be done in Eurovision, but I love that it can be done here, because there are so many performances that just get so much life when you have a lot more things going on. And maybe that's just my ADHD brain working, right? Sometimes in Eurovision, when you have a big stage and you just have a single singer or maybe a singer and 2 dancers on stage, sometimes they get completely eaten up by the stage. They're just tiny little people on the stage there, and for me it just feels empty and I really struggle to connect with it. But here I've just had a lot of fun with a lot of these performances, because it's big and it's very much in the style of the American stereotype, right, where everything is bigger in America. This is definitely bigger than the usual stagings we're seeing at Eurovision, but I think some of these big stagings have been really fun. I love the staging for Oregon's $1 Million Smoothies, for example. I thought that was really creative and really fun, and it worked great. And some of the party songs, like Ready to Go with Yam House, for example, really just, you feel the energy, you feel all of these things, because there are all these people dancing and having fun on stage. I think it works quite well in this competition. But I also love that we have these more experimental stagings that feel like something that could come completely out of Melodifestivalen. And Mr. Independent, I've already mentioned that song, but I think that staging was very much a Melodifestivalen kind of staging. It was cool, it was sleek, and yeah, it wasn't maybe like, you can tell in some way that the cameramen and the producers who are doing this, not all of them are experienced in doing these kinds of shows. You just don't have that kind of show in America in the same kind of style, right? So it maybe isn't as polished as something you would see in Melodifestivalen and Eurovision, but I still think it's a good way there. And we have to remember, this is a first season, you know? It's about finding the right people for this kind of thing, and also just learning how to produce the show. And I don't think you learn that in one season. I think if the show gets more seasons, which hopefully it does, I think a lot of these things would be massively improved. The music is fun, the staging is fun, and the hosts are fun. I felt like it was a bit of a fever dream when Kelly Clarkson and Snoop Dogg was announced as the host for the show, and I was very interested to see how was this going to go. But they are amazing. If you haven't seen the show yet, go in and watch a video of their chemistry together. They work so well together. I'm possibly gonna offend some people who hate the American Song Contest for saying this, but Kelly and Snoop remind me so much of Petra and Mons from Eurovision back in 2016. I think they have that right kind of energy, and they work so well together, and they feed off each other's energy to just create something that's really fun and really genuine. I love that they comment on the songs and they talk about what they like about the song that's just performed. I love their interactions with the performers in the green room, and I just love their interactions together. They are having fun, and it does seem genuine. Oftentimes when you have like these two hosts trying to play off each other, sometimes it can feel really fake and really scripted, but these two, they aren't afraid to go off script. They aren't afraid to say their own opinions and say something that feels fun. And I love that about it, and I wish we had more of that in Eurovision, because one thing that I absolutely hate, that I really, really wish we could get rid of, is the 3 or 4 host dynamic that we've seen in Eurovision in recent years. I hate it. I don't understand why we need to have 4 or 3 hosts on stage, because they just stand there looking into the camera and they say their lines without having any sort of personality. And it's so boring in my opinion. I think 2 hosts are the perfect amount when you're doing an entertainment show like this. And I really hope we get back to it one day in Eurovision. But until then, at least I can enjoy it in American Song Contest. And whoever casted these 2 people, great job, because they really work well together. It's also just fun to learn about the States. I don't know a lot about American culture other than the stereotypical things we get here in the Western world. So to actually hear about the individual states, the smaller states that I've maybe known nothing about, the fact that they've managed to sprinkle in a little bit of information about the states in the postcards, I think that's really clever, and I think it's really fun. Not just for someone like me who's a European who's watching this without that much knowledge in American culture, but I think also for people coming from California or something like that, who's maybe never gotten out of their state, the fact that they can actually learn something and learn more about the country that they live in from this program, I think that's really cool. It might get over the head of some people might not even really think about the things in the postcards, but I think it's fun, and just the whole thing with like seeing it on the map and be like, oh, that's where that state is. There are definitely states that I've looked at where it's like, I swear that's on the East Coast, not the West Coast, so I'm learning as well. And not just about the American states, but also about the territories. And I'm so happy that this isn't just a state competition, but these American territories that are taking part are also getting their chance to show off their culture, because it's kind of the same with like having someone like Andorra or San Marino in Eurovision. We have these micro states or micro territories in this case that most people don't really know anything about and who don't really have another platform where they can show off their culture besides tourism. Suddenly these people can get on this stage on primetime television on NBC, and they get to show off traditional clothing, traditional musical styles, traditional instruments from their countries. And that's so cool. I wish a lot of them would like take the step further and sing in their regional languages, actually have those presented on the stage. Maybe we'll get that if the show continues. For now, we've only really had English and Spanish. I believe those are the only languages we've had in the contest this year, and I would have loved to see more of these and more of these like regional dialects and stuff like that. I think that could have been really cool. But just the fact that they are represented and we get to learn about something like Guam or American Samoa or Puerto Rico, some of these places, they get to shine on this stage along with all the states. And I think that's really cool, because you could have just as well not done that. No one kind of forced them to do that. You could have just as well done it with all the states in America. So the fact that they've actually done it like this, I think kudos to them. So there's a lot that I love about this show. I think it's really cool. The essence of it is really cool. But there are some things that are just a little bit sad. Some things that just don't work quite well, and some of the things that I think may be a contributing factor to why some people don't want to tune into this show. So let's get over those as well. I think my biggest struggle, my biggest pet peeve, if you will, is the fact that they keep changing the format in every single show, it feels like. I get that they want to try things out and they aren't quite sure how they want this format to 100% be yet. I get that. But this is a show that's on air right now. You should have done pilots or test shows where you could test these things out with a focus group, figuring out, okay, does it work if we don't show the full results of the jury, or do we want to show the full results of the jury? I get that they want to try these things out, but that should have been done before this show got on air, because it's so confusing that you turn on your TV, you watch the next qualifying round, and suddenly it feels like everything is changed and the graphics feel slightly different, and suddenly you get postcards before an ad, and then you don't get the song before like the ad break. I think it makes them look unprofessional, and it just confuses people even more, because in general it is actually kind of a confusing format, I feel like. And now I'm filming this video before the first of the semifinals. I don't know when it's gonna come out, but I'm filming it before. So currently I don't actually know, like, are we going to know who the qualifiers from Heat 5 are before the semifinal, or are we going to get those in the semifinal and then they'll just be performing in semifinal 2? So I'm just going to do a little insert here because I feel like that makes sense. We do know now how this is going to go ahead. Apparently from what it says, I found it on Reddit, that the voting is open till midnight, so like about 12 hours, I think it says. And that's fine, right? But we've never been presented to this. It's never been formally mentioned anywhere. And also, now they're doing this kind of voting for the semifinals. But then how are the finals gonna go? Because we would imagine that we get to see who wins in the final. They haven't talked about that they're gonna have a results show. So then they're gonna change up the results again, right? And it's this thing all the time. It keeps changing and changing and changing. When are we going to get the results of the semifinals? Because I feel like it's okay if we get the semifinal 1 qualifiers in the beginning of semifinal 2, but I would like to know who from semifinal 2 has gone to the final before the final. They haven't said anything about how they're going to do this. It feels confusing. We don't know the second of the Redemption Act either yet, and we don't know when that's gonna be revealed. So very, very confusing format, especially for people who are used to Eurovision, because there are so many things in the format that's just so different compared to Eurovision. And I think a lot of us assumed going into the show that there would be a lot of similarities, but I feel like the similarities aren't actually that great. However, one thing that we can say that kind of happens both at Eurovision and here is people complaining about the juries. I usually don't have a problem with the Eurovision juries, but I get why people have a problem with the jury here in the American Song Contest. They feel very biased. It felt like from show 1 to show 4, they sent the exact same song through 4 times, and then at least we got a female in the fifth heat. But they've all been ballads. They've all been slow songs. And we gotta remember, the jury here in ASC works the same way as it does in ESC, where they're watching the dress rehearsal and they vote based on that. I don't think we have an audience at the dress rehearsal, so maybe that is why some of the slower songs they connect better with the juries, because the high energy songs, they definitely have a huge disadvantage when you don't have the crowd energy to feed off of. I get that, but they should still be professional enough to see through that and see the songs for what they are instead of only voting for ballads. If you look at who are actually on the jury panel, there is one jury from each state and territory, there's one member, and a lot of them are radio executives or pop music producers from a label, which is different than in Eurovision, where you also have like entertainment people and people who don't work with music just as a producer or a radio producer or whatever. You have a broader spectrum of people, and I think that is what makes the Eurovision jury a little bit more balanced, where this, with so many of them being radio people or producers, they aren't necessarily looking at what is fun, what is a good song to listen to. They're more looking at, okay, what would work well on the radio, or what would get on new music now on Spotify. And I think that plays so much more of a role here in ASC than it does in Eurovision. And I think it's a shame, because there are some fantastic songs who haven't got the chance to go through, and some of the more unique songs, some of the ones that are really showing off culture, haven't really gotten the chance to actually shine and shine further on in the contest, because the jury has ranked them so low. Again, I'm recording this video before we know which of the songs from Heat 5 are going to go through for the televote, but I'm really crossing my fingers and really hoping that American Samoa actually get to go through, because that really is a beautiful cultural presentation that actually didn't do too bad in the juries, and I really hope the public can push it through and get it as one of the public qualifiers, because it definitely deserves to be there on the stage again and really represent something different than some of the other songs we have in the contest. And finally, this is maybe a personal thing, maybe other people aren't gonna 100% agree with me here, but I just don't understand the whole thing of showing the juror ranking the way they are. I liked in the first show that we didn't know who was gonna qualify from like the jury selection before right at the end of the show. It's very much what we're used to in national finals and in Eurovision, and maybe that's why I like that format better. But I just really think it takes some of the fun out of it when you're constantly seeing these rankings, constantly seeing how the juries have voted, because maybe there's a song you really like halfway through the show, it gets last place, and you know, well, that's it, this song doesn't have a chance of qualifying. and it just makes you lose a little bit of interest in it. You know, you want to be able to sit there all week and be excited. Is my favorite going to go through to the semifinals? And it just feels like if your favorite is among like the bottom 3 in a heat, there is a high percentage that that song isn't going to go through to the semifinals. I don't know, it just kind of ruins it for me personally, and maybe some people find it really interesting, and I think it has worked a little bit better in the last 2 qualifying heats when we've actually had like the jury qualifier change right at the end. And I do wonder if the producers have actually tweaked the running order for that to happen. It could possibly be, I don't know for sure, but it could possibly be a producer thing that they've actually put the songs in the running order that they have after the dress rehearsal. I don't know. But at the end of the day, I think these things are minor complaints, and I think it is things that could be changed and could be improved on if they were to do a second season. I know the times that we're living in is very much like if a show isn't a big hit from day one, networks, especially in America, don't really want to risk it. They don't really want to put money into doing a second season of something, when in reality, if you've worked with TV, you know that the first season is never going to be perfect, and your show doesn't get great until the second or third season. I mean, Eurovision wasn't an instant hit. It took years for Eurovision to build up the reputation that it has today. And I think American Song Contest maybe cannot get to the level of Eurovision, but I think it could be a show that a lot of American people really loved. But it needs that time, and it needs that love for a broadcaster that really cares and doesn't just look at viewing figures, but look at, okay, so what kind of cultural impact does the show actually have? Because I think it does something that there isn't a lot of other American TV shows that do. Not only the fact that it's showcasing original songs, which, judging by how many times the hosts are mentioning that it's original songs, it's very clear that this is not something that the Americans are used to. They're used to singing competitions, not song competitions. So it's nice that they have that, because I think songwriting is just as much of a skill, if not a bigger skill, than being a great singer. But also just that it is a cultural show. It is a show that cannot just pick all of its contestants from California, but actually have to go out there and represent every single state. And you have this football mentality in America where it's like, you know, it's so important that you're rooting for your home state team. And I think if they can take that energy, put that on the American Song Contest, this could be a huge hit. But that's what I think. What do you think? You're more than welcome to let me know down in the comments below. I would love to know what you think about the show, and if you are watching, I do think I'm going to do some more content on this contest in the next couple weeks leading up to the final, and I'm also thinking about doing maybe a special live stream before the final, so that might be something that could be really fun to do, because I think this show deserves exposure, because I've had a lot of fun with it, and I think about like 10 to 15 songs out of the bunch that I've added to my daily playlist, and there are also some other songs that I'm bobbing along to that I've added to some other playlists. I think, considering that this is season 1, the quality of songs, it's very high, and I think it's very cool. And I've got to discover some American artists that I probably wouldn't have found otherwise, so I'm having a great time with this show, even though it might be a little bit messy at times. Those were my thoughts on the American Song Contest so far. I hope you enjoyed this little chatty video. I hope it was interesting. If you like this video, then please leave a like on it, and please hit the subscribe button and turn on the notification bell so you don't miss next time I post a video. I'm very tired today, so apologies if my words have kind of come out a little bit weirdly. There's a lot of things going on, and it's also very warm in here. It's like very warm outside, so the room obviously gets very warm as well. But that's enough complaining for me. Thank you for watching this video, and I'll hopefully see you guys very soon.